Hey, it's John, and welcome to the interview. Today, I'm joined by David Rendall, who is a keynote speaker for companies, Fortune 50 companies like Microsoft and State Farm. And he's also the author of 4 different books. And one of them is this book right here, The Freak Factor, which is an excellent read. Highly recommend this book. We'll make sure to link that up in the show notes for everybody listening here on David's page. The Freak Factor, which is really about how to find your unique message through your weaknesses. I know growing up, I was always taught that I needed to fix all these things that were wrong with me and all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of us heard that message growing up. But David talks a lot about really amplifying your weaknesses to help you stand out in a bigger way. So whether you're looking to build a company or a brand or looking to build your legacy or your own thought leadership platform, this will be a great discussion for you. So, David, thanks so much for taking a few moments today.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Cool. Let's just start off with your background a little bit, kind of fill us in on who David is, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I started off in college. I studied psychology. My main goal was my mission at that time, because of some childhood experiences, was to be helpful, to help people. So I studied psychology, started working, helping folks with disabilities to get job opportunities. So working with companies to employ folks with disabilities, which isn't what they're usually looking for. And then I moved on to an organization that worked with adults who had disabilities, and we did the same kinds of things. And I did that for a number of years, got in more into the management side of things, the leadership side of things. And then along the way, got my master's in counseling and my doctorate in management and leadership, and started teaching part-time, started teaching college classes part-time. And in 2004, I quit to teach full-time, teach leadership and management full-time, moved down to North Carolina, and started my business at the same time. Started doing some speaking and some training and some consulting. And over the years, it grew to be big enough that I stopped doing the teaching and kept doing the speaking and the writing and those kinds of things. So it's a quick overview of kind of the journey.
Yeah, doing what you love then now, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
That's exciting. So speaking of that, like what really lights you up inside? Like what is that one thing, just to kind of give our audience an idea of who you are? Like what gets you just out of your mind excited every day?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 things. I tell people I want to be hilarious and I want to be helpful. So I love when I'm doing a presentation, I love making people laugh. I love making people feel good. I love telling that story and having you just feel that enjoyment that everybody has. But I also don't want to just be an entertainer. I want to be helpful. I want to have an impact. One of the quotes I use at the end of my talk is from E. Cummings, and it says, "We do not believe in ourselves until someone reveals that deep inside of us something is valuable, worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch." And so what I tell people is my mission, what lights me up, is helping people find that thing, see that thing inside of them that they didn't know about, that's not only valuable, but they've been told is worthless. They were told it's the most worthless thing about them, and I show them it's actually the most valuable thing about them, that it's worth listening to, that it's worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch. And so when somebody comes back with some feedback, like they use that with one of their kids, or it changed their life, or it influenced their career, that kind of stuff just really, really lights me up.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds awesome. So let's talk about the freak factor then. Like, what is that? What is the freak factor? Like, here's the book again. Everybody watching the video, and they can go to your website, I believe, and buy it. Right? Is it drendall.com?
Rendall.com. Yeah, and it's on Amazon. It'll just link to Amazon. Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, what is the freak factor? Let's talk a little bit about what you mean by that.
So I discovered that sort of by accident. I was always in trouble. Like you said, I was always in trouble because I couldn't sit still and be quiet and do what I was told. And now I make a living as a professional speaker, standing up, talking, and running my own business. So I learned that my biggest weaknesses were also strengths, and that the worst things about me, or what I'd been told were the worst things about me, were actually the best things about me. And I wondered if that was true for other people. And so I designed an assessment, started writing some blog posts, ended up writing the book, and found that I think for most people, their biggest weakness, and even a series of weaknesses, are also strengths, that there's a downside or a negative way to look at any positive characteristic. And so then I started exploring, how does that affect our marriages? How does that affect us as parents? How does that affect us when we manage people? How does that affect the way we even choose our business strategy? Because we're taught to fix business weaknesses as well. But I have a lot of examples of how businesses have deliberate weaknesses so they can have that corresponding strength, so they can succeed and stand out.
Yeah, and why are people afraid to like share their weaknesses? Is it really that wiring, that tribal wiring that we all have from way back in the cave days, where if you were cast away from the norm, you were pretty much dead? Is that really what it comes down to at a subconscious level?
I think there might be a little subconscious, but I don't think it has to be subconscious. I think it's very conscious and very in our face. You know, when you go to school, you're taught to follow the rules, do what you're told, fit in. Good is normal, bad is weird. When you're at home, when you put your socks on the wrong feet, or you put them inside out, or you put your pants on backwards, your parents don't go like, good try, oh, let's go out and embrace our weirdness. They go, hey, you can't do it that way. Let's put them on the right way. Let's do things the right way. Let's look around and make sure no one's offended or embarrassed by the way we're behaving. We learn really early, not just, I don't think just ingrained, but I think we're taught consistently at home, at work, at school, that it's important to be attuned to what everybody else wants and to try to shave off those parts of you that may not fit what those people are looking for. And we learn to not be ourselves. We learn to try to fit in. And we learn that most of our uniqueness is weakness. We learn that most of our difference is bad. We learn that weird is a criticism, not a praise. So I think maybe some of it's hardwired, because we certainly, like you said, to your point, we are wired to want acceptance and belonging. And so when people threaten to take that away from us, if we're too weird, then it's a way that drives our behavior, right? It affects our choices. And so I'm trying to show people that, not only is that not true, but you can also find people who are weird just like you. You can have belonging and be weird at the same time.
Right. Absolutely. So you're saying it's more programming from a young age, from parents and schools and stuff, where you kind of have to sit in your space and shut up and listen and not move too much or talk to your buddy next door. You're a quote unquote bad kid. That's pretty deep. Those are pretty deep mental cuts, huh, for people that are maybe a little different. Maybe they just, don't like following what other people. I know I was terrible at that.
Yeah. And I think everybody is. I think everybody is different. What happens with school and then also with work, but especially with school, is there's a very narrow definition of what good is. Yeah. There's a very narrow definition of what good and positive and effective and appropriate is. And so when you're not inside of the very narrow bounds, you're bad. Yeah. And I think that carries over at work as well, to a large extent, unless you can find your own thing or pursue a slightly different path. So I think a lot of it is external, where our parents are just trying to help us get through what they see as the world, right? They want us to be successful, and the world seems to want you to be in that narrow band as well. School wants you to be in that narrow band. Your parents want you to be in that narrow band. Not because I always say, not because they have the wrong intentions, but because they have the wrong framework. They're trying to help you, but they're using the same tools that they've been taught by their parents and teachers and employers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be good to get into a couple of maybe case examples for like a business, maybe, or an individual here in a second. But before we get there, let's kind of stay with the personal psychological stuff. How would you say people can get to know themselves better? Because like you're advocating with this freak factor, that it's every strength has a weakness, every weakness has a strength, and by amplifying that weakness, you're standing out and even allowing yourself to amplify that strength even more, right?
Yeah, right.
But a lot of people, like, I know I've struggled with this in my life some, and I've talked to a lot of people who have too, is like really knowing who you are and like what your strengths are, and is this a helpful strength or a helpful weakness? So how can people get to know themselves a little better? You have any ideas around that?
So I think there's two parts of that. Because I argue that every weakness has a corresponding strength, we can use the criticisms from other people, that negativity that we get from other people, to say, okay, well, what's the other side of that? And that's one of the things that I include in the book, is there's an assessment where you pick your strengths from a list of 52, you pick your weaknesses from a list of 52, and then it literally tells you this weakness goes with this strength. Creative people tend to be disorganized. Organized people tend to be inflexible. People call you stubborn. That's a weakness, but that's because you're persistent. So we really try to help with that. In fact, that's one of the whole big sections of the book, is exactly what you said. The whole foundation is awareness. If you're not aware of your strengths and weaknesses, none of this other stuff works. And too often it's hard sometimes to separate who we really are from who we've sort of had to become in order to be successful in the world that's kind of always demanding different things from us. So I think I tell people, anything you can do, take a DISC assessment, take an MBTI assessment, do Gallup's Strengths Finder assessment, but even do the Facebook which Star Wars character assessment. It doesn't matter as long as you're thinking about who am I really, not who am I supposed to be, who do I have to be, who do I need to be at work. I think anything you can do, but that's why I developed the assessment in the book, is to help people clarify, okay, because people would hear my talk when I first started, and before I had the assessment, and they'd say, okay, just like you did, what's good about this bad thing about me?
Yeah.
And so the chart really answers that. For 52 different kinds of weaknesses, if somebody says this is wrong with you, it says, well, here's the strength, here's the thing to build on, here's what you should take advantage of.
Yeah, and that assessment's in the book, as you said,
Yeah.
too. So if
Yeah.
everybody listening, you can get the freak factor and work on
Yeah.
kind of discovering some of those things. And I like how you laid that out, like the kind of the dichotomy of like strength and weakness. You know, it really kind of paints the picture, because like for me, like I'm more big picture and fast moving. My wife is a perfect complement, because she's more like organized and thoughtful and detailed, right?
Yeah.
So,
and that's exactly not only is the assessment in there and it covers both of those things, like yours is what I call global and general, and hers is detail oriented and meticulous. And the downside is she gets criticized for being perfectionistic, but you get criticized for not taking care of those details, right?
Yeah.
So if you can partner, and that's the last step, affiliation, partner with people who are strong where you're weak. But what we normally do is we're just constantly antagonistic towards that other person about how they don't have our strength, and they're antagonistic with us about how we don't have their strength, instead of working together as a team to partner with somebody who has what you don't have, right?
Right.
So that's crucial, and that's why the assessment's great to use. There's a chapter on marriage. There's a chapter on parenting. The assessment's great to use with your partner, with your spouse, because when you can see each other's strengths and weaknesses and you can both enhance that awareness at the same time, it's really helpful. And even so many people, even when I would talk to businesses and business managers, they would say, oh, well, yeah, I'll use this at my company, but I got this kid who I'm having trouble with. And so I actually wrote a book for kids, but also there's a chapter on parenting in the Freak Factor now, and there's an assessment for kids. So the same assessment we did for adults, I redesigned it for kids so a younger kid could understand it. It asks them questions about their strengths and weaknesses, and it just makes the strength-weakness combinations a little more clear. But you can even start that awareness at a much younger age by getting your kids involved in this as well. Absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah. So let's break down maybe a couple of case examples for people listening, because I think they get the idea of the overall premise now.
Yeah.
For like, let's say a business manager, and I know you have a chapter on management in your book as well, so people can grab that book and get more details. But can you kind of give us just an overview of like an example, like how could a company use this whole strength weakness kind of thing, and in helping their bottom line and helping things run smoother and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, my favorite example is a guy who actually built a business around a weakness, right? So his son had autism. His son had autism. His name is Thorkild Son. He's a Danish guy, and he was in the software technology business. And he understood two things. Number one, that his son's autism had two symptoms: hyperfocus and doing the same things over and over again. And that software testing required two things from an employee: hyperfocus and doing the same thing over and over again. So he didn't just help his son find the right fit. He created an entire business that was built around his son's disability. But when his son was inside of that organization, it wasn't a disability. It was actually a strength. It was a competitive advantage. And he didn't just hire his son. He hired 49 other people with autism. And they've been so successful that SAP, the global software company, is now looking for hundreds of people with autism from all over the country to do software testing for them. So not just even dealing with the employees you have, but if you're going so far as to seek out an employee with a disability, a diagnosed mental condition, because you recognize the truth of this idea that weaknesses are also strengths, that's one of the huge ways you can find talent where nobody else is finding talent. You can find the perfect person where no one else is even looking. Instead of looking for the same people from the same schools who've studied the same things with the same grades, you're now looking for completely different kinds of people, because you're moving beyond most people's conception of what good is and seeing that there's a lot of strength hiding inside of even diagnosable disabilities. And so that's one of, and that's a pretty extreme one. And that's why I use that one, because if that's true, then if you have a slightly messy employee, you probably don't need to give up on them, right? You go to the chart and you find the upside. You go to the assessment, you find the upside. It's usually that they're creative. And then you say, okay, within our organization, where do we need creative people? How can we take advantage of their creativity? That's alignment. We talk about that in the book, alignment. And then avoidance, how do we give them less of the organized tasks and the things that require detail orientation and that meticulous behavior? And then affiliation, how do we help them partner with people who are strong where they're weak? How do we as a team accommodate the fact that this person's creative, but this person's organized, so why don't we team them up? Instead of the traditional approach is, that person needs to get more organized. I'm going to send them to classes, send them to coaching, get them some books. I'm going to threaten them or create some kind of incentives. None of those things really work. So helping people find the right fit and managing the work based on people's strengths and managing around people's weaknesses instead of thinking you're going to change them. Those are really the real key steps.
So company-wide, is it a matter of assessing your staff, your team through something like what you're offering in your book, or like strength finders, or how the world sees you, or whatever? There's a number of different personality or strength tests out there. And then literally like reshuffling people in certain places. Have you seen that be accepted?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've seen work, people, right, for the organization.
Yeah, I've seen people completely reorganize. Well, it's also a lot of work to deal with people who aren't in the right place, right? It's a lot of work to every day be constantly trying to manage things that way. So yeah, I've seen people who are entrepreneurs who run smaller businesses who've reorganized the entire company that way. Larger companies do too. My friend right now used to work for Gallup, and he's doing a project on his own right now for a company where they're rewriting every job description to be based on strengths and to be tailored to people's particular strengths. Because they've seen the value and the power of doing that. So here, let me just walk through kind of the framework real fast, because I think that would help. So you're right. You start with assessment. So you'd assess your people. The key then is this idea of acceptance, though, to realize you're not going to change that. So what some people do is go, okay, I've assessed John. John's big picture, but he's not detail-oriented enough. He doesn't understand the importance of details. So I'm going to teach him and train him and incentivize him and coach him and motivate him to be better at the details. That's not what I'm talking about. It's you go from awareness to acceptance. You go, that's the way John is. I'm not going to change that. Then I'm not only just going to accept it, I'm going to appreciate it. I'm going to see that John brings a lot of positive things to the organization. There's a lot of strengths that go with his weakness. We need that global, big picture, strategic mindset. That's going to be awesome for us. So we need to tap into that with John. So then we move to amplification. We give John opportunities to actually turn that up. We put him on strategic committees. We put him on new projects. We ask him to come up with innovative ideas. So we give him more amplification. That's partially alignment too. When we give you chances to amplify, we're putting you in situations where we need more of that big picture global perspective. We don't need more of that granular detail-oriented nature. Then we give you avoidance. So we actually give you permission to stop doing certain aspects of your existing job that require that detail that you can't provide and that you're not good at. And then we affiliate, we probably sign you up, we partner you up with somebody who is really meticulous and detail-oriented but doesn't have that big picture perspective. And then you two as a team start to really take care of business and really accomplish some things. So it's a 7-step process, and it's the way the book is organized, and it's the way all the application chapters are organized. But yeah, you have to, and if you don't start, as you've said, with assessment, if you don't know what your employee's strengths and weaknesses are, if all you're going to do is focus on the weakness and which you wish you could fix it, it all kind of stops at that point. So it's being aware and then also acknowledging these strengths and weaknesses always go together. You can't fix it, and you can't have one without the other. There's no such thing as a perfect employee or the perfect person.
Yeah, makes sense. And thank you for walking through that. I think that helps people kind of understand the steps. And again, they're all in the book. Like you said, you have a couple different sections on different scenarios and those steps that you take people through. So that'd be a perfect resource. So, let's switch gears to maybe like a personal brand or something like that. I work with a lot more like consultants and coaches and individuals who want to build thought leadership and those kind of things. I think there's so much noise in the market space these days, and you got to almost stand out. And I can't remember who was telling me that obviously you need to be good at what you do, but they said it's almost better to be different than just good sometimes. Right.
Yeah.
I've seen some people rise fairly quickly in our space just because they were bold, they were different, they were unique, not necessarily, I mean, they were smart too and good people, but it wasn't necessarily because they were just this ultra amazing at what they did. They also had this unique look or feel or way of talking or, that kind of thing. So can you talk a little bit about how brands can stand out a little bit and instead of just being more of the same?
So that's one of the things that I'm really excited about now. My friend and I, Stan Phelps, we wrote a book called Pink Goldfish, where we took this idea that weaknesses could also be strengths and we applied it to businesses. So the subtitle of the Freak Factor book is Discovering Uniqueness by Flaunting Weakness. And flaunting means to parade without shame, to be unapologetic. And it means that we can redefine, like you said, people, it's about more than being good. Well, the problem with good is again, it's always a narrow definition. Good is you have a really high quality video. but then somebody else comes along and they're recording from their car with background noise, but it's really interesting and it gets people's attention and it's really immediate and it seems authentic, and all of a sudden people are loving it even though there's no special camera, the audio isn't great, the person is on the move, there's a lot of background noise, and you're like, wait, that's not good. Well, what they did is say, well, there's a strength to having perfect audio, but there's also a weakness to it. Can feel a little sanitized. It can feel a little overproduced, and they wanted something more authentic. And so their thing wasn't as good as far as all sorts of characteristics. The sound wasn't good. The video wasn't as good. The content wasn't as polished, but there were a lot of strengths to it as well. So that's what we really try to teach people to do is, especially when it's a personal brand, we're really talking about taking those unique strengths and weaknesses you have and being unapologetic about them. Saying like you do, hey, I'm not about this podcast isn't going to be about the little details. It's going to be about big picture ideas. And if somebody complains, they put a review of the podcast, there's not enough practical information about how I'm supposed to apply this to my life. Not only do you accept that, you don't try to fix it, and you might even post that number one on your website and say, if this is what you're looking for, I'm not your guy. I'm the big picture idea guy, and I'm not trying to be that. I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to try to make that person happy. This is who I am. I'm not going to make everybody happy. I'm going to try to tap into that. And so businesses on a larger scale can do that as well. But really for a personal brand, for smaller businesses, it's really just about taking who you are as a person and being comfortable amplifying that instead of trying to fit into other people's boxes of what's good, appropriate, and successful. One of my favorite examples of that is the Alamo Drafthouse Cinema. We put them in pink goldfish. And so what they do is they have a really strict no talking, no texting policy. And if you come late, you don't even get to come into the theater. But if you talk or text, they kick you out. And this lady was talking and texting, and they kicked her out, and she sent them a really nasty voicemail. And what most companies would do at this point is they would apologize, send her some coupons, say we shouldn't have treated you so badly, and we're sorry you're upset, and please, accept our deepest and sincerest apologies. And they would try to turn her around and help her become a customer again. What the Alamo Drafthouse did was they were unapologetic. They flaunted. They were unashamed. And so they took her voicemail, they transcribed it, they put it into a YouTube video, they posted it on YouTube and got millions of hits, basically antagonizing this woman. And this is what we call it in the book, antagonizing. And not only that, they show it at the beginning of their movies as an example of don't talk and text, and we're serious. And at the end of her big, long complaint transcript, she says, I'm never coming back. And they say, great, we hope you don't, tell your friends. And so that's an example of a company, and we have a whole bunch of them in that book, a company who says, you know what, this is who we are. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be strengths and weaknesses. We're going to make some people very happy. We're going to make other people very, very unhappy, and we're comfortable with that. And so that's why most people don't stick out, is because in their goal to make everyone happy, they end up looking just like everyone else. In their effort to become better, they allow a very narrow definition of good to influence the way that they do things, and they end up doing things exactly like everyone else. And in that case, unless they're doing it that much better than everyone else, it just becomes invisible. Yeah. And so again, we tend to look around at other people to decide how to behave and how to do things well, or what doing things poorly looks like. And too often that leads everyone in the same direction. So if you have the courage to go in a different direction, but again, that different direction is always going to be defined as wrong, inappropriate, ineffective, incorrect, unprofessional. And that's the weakness side that we have to be able to tap into, to say, they might call it that, but I'm going to take a chance. I think this could work. I think I'm going to redefine what good is in this particular situation.
So why aren't more people doing that then? I mean, is it a fear thing? Are they afraid? Again, it goes back to, I think we talked a little bit about this from the school days and from the wiring of the tribal wiring and all that. I mean, is it just is that people don't feel like they're enough, or they feel, I mean, fear of criticism is one of, I know, Napoleon Hill's deepest fears of human beings, right? Is the fear of the tribe criticizing you. Is that really what it is? Or why aren't more people willing to push the envelope? Because I know I get nervous about talking about certain things like that I would talk about and I don't talk about, but I could.
I think because we don't have enough, I think we don't have as many models. That's why Stan and I try to use a lot of examples in Pink Goldfish, because it's one thing for me to argue that you should. It's another thing for me to show you that companies are succeeding while doing it. Like REI, what has been closed for the last 4 years on Black Friday, the biggest shopping day of the year. And REI says, you can't shop here. Go outside. We're going to go outside. They pay their employees. They shut down their website. That's a bold move, and it could have fallen through, right? So I think part of it is people's desire for security, stability, certainty, safety. And I think some of that, as you said, is sort of hardwired. But I think we have also been taught that you should benchmark, you should follow the crowd, you should find what's working, and you should copy it. You should learn from other people. I mean, if you and I are standing on the street corner in New York City and I look up, you're probably going to look up. And if you look up and I'm looking up, then someone who walks down the street and sees us is probably going to look up because they figure we're probably looking up for something. And in the same way, if you and I are walking down the street in New York City and some people are if everyone in front of us is sprinting in the opposite direction, screaming, we're probably at least going to turn and start jogging and looking over our shoulders to figure out if Godzilla's coming or what's happening. So there's a certain amount of and this is hardwiring psychologically, where we kind of look around to other people. Is this dangerous? Is this good? Is this bad? Is this interesting? We look to see how other people behave to some extent to gauge how we should behave. And a certain amount of that is hardwired, but I think it's not the hardwiring, it's the 17 years of programming in school and in high school and in college. It's the years of programming, especially when you work in big corporations and big organizations. It's the family environments that we grow up in, where our parents try to define what good and bad are, and oftentimes are very critical of people who aren't behaving in a certain way or a prescribed way, which is usually their way, their idea of what good and successful looks like. And so I think you hear that enough and see that enough, and at some point you just think that's what success looks like. That's what good people do. Good people follow the rules, fill in the blanks, do what they're told, follow the crowd. And we do, to some extent, believe, even though it's never true, that that's how businesses have been successful. But in almost every case, you can point out how the most successful business, or the one that's successful now, took a completely different path than the one previously. And yet we never see that, and we don't pay attention enough to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the biggest successful brands are very unique in what they stand out as. Like think of Apple or something is, making computers. They weren't the first or the best at one point either, but they created this culture, this brand. I was just at Conscious Capitalism this past week and met up with a lot of friends there, and they talked a lot about that, this need for businesses not just to be a brand, but to actually create a movement, a higher purpose movement around something. And it could be related to your service, but it'll also be something kind of on the fringe too, that sort of like rallies the movement behind what they're doing and stuff. So especially younger generations, they're going to want more meaning to think and stuff moving forward. So
absolutely. And I mean, that's again where, a lot of people think like a good employee is one who comes and works hard all day and doesn't leave for stupid or inappropriate reasons. But like at Patagonia, they've set up the business so people can go surfing when the surf's up, right? I was just listening, I knew about it, but I was just listening to something. I think it was Kotler's Rise of Superman. And you can't predict perfectly when the surf is going to be just right. And so when it is, you have to have almost spontaneous and immediate flexibility to get out there. And so Patagonia's tried to build a corporate, they're a massive corporation, but they've tried to build a corporate structure in which people still have the freedom and flexibility to pursue their passions, even when it's not, in that case, surfing. It's not some massive cosmic sort of a thing. But they also, they're a good example. We use them in the book of an opposite of doing things a completely different way. They took out an ad in the New York Times and they put one of their jackets on a 2-page, full spread ad and said, "Do not buy this jacket." Again, kind of like an REI kind of thing. Well, why would you tell people not to buy your clothes? Well, because they believe in sustainability, like you're talking about. They believe in purpose. They believe in environmental stewardship. And so they'd rather you get the jacket repaired. And so they have a repair service now. And then if you don't want it repaired, but you don't want it anymore, they will repair it and sell it to someone else as worn wear. So they're basically cannibalizing their own business by creating a Goodwill thrift store inside of a Patagonia, but because it's what they believe in, right? And so it seems like what you wouldn't do, you wouldn't tell people not to buy your clothes. You wouldn't try to sell less clothes. You wouldn't try to help people avoid buying more of your clothes. You wouldn't try to make your clothes better so people didn't ever need them repaired. And they're doing all of those things and they're having tremendous success. So there's a whole constellation of things that other businesses just don't do, won't do, believe won't work, that do work. And yet we don't see as many people following that path, even though it's clearly there. And I think part of that might just be even media and other things like that. You just don't hear those stories as much as you hear the negative, greedy stories about people who do it the wrong way or people who don't care about their employees and things like that, even though I think there's plenty of good examples out there.
Yeah, no, well said. So let's shift gears to you a little bit in your personal life as we wrap this up. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading a book right now, actually. Let's see. I just started I'm going to have to look at my phone. I just started I'm reading North by Scott Jurek. So it's a book about an ultramarathon runner named Scott Jurek, who was attempting to set the FKT, the fastest known time on the Appalachian Trail. So he'd won all sorts of ultramarathons, 100-mile races, things like that. He's one of the best ultramarathon runners of all time. But he decided to take on the task of running the Appalachian Trail in like 45 days when it normally takes people like 6 months to hike it. So that's what I'm listening to that right now. And then I'm actually reading a book called Beyond the Piggy Bank by a guy named Clint Greenleaf. And it's a book about how families can teach their kids effectively how to manage their own money. So he grew up in a company, I think, in a family of like financial managers and investment managers. And I think he became a CPA and then started a publishing company. And he read like 50 books about it. And it's a really good, really well organized book. It actually makes me feel bad I didn't read it earlier. My kids are 17, 15, and 12. So I've done some things right, and there's some things I wish I would have done differently. But it's short, it's really well organized, and it's really fascinating. So yeah, I read a little bit before bed and a little bit when I wake up, and I'm always listening to an audiobook when I'm in the car or when I'm out running or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So what are you most proud of in your life?
I think there's a lot of ways to answer that question, but I'll tell a story about something that just happened recently. I travel a lot because I'm a speaker, and I got back. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and my house is about an hour, almost exactly an hour door to door from the airport. And I got off the plane. I switched my phone back on, and I got a text message from my daughter, asked her how her day was. She said it was good, but it wasn't very good for some of her friends. So I just about texted her and said, well, what wasn't very good? But I thought that's probably not a great thing to text. That's a hard thing to do on text. So I just picked up my phone, hooked up my headphones, and as I was walking to my car at the airport, I called her to see how things were going. And she started talking to me. And she's 17 years old. I got to my car and she was talking to me. And I got in my car and started driving home and she was talking to me. And then we talked for the entire 1 hour drive home. And then I got home and started unpacking my stuff, and she came in with me into my closet and was talking to me while I was unpacking, and we kept talking for like a total of about an hour and a half. And so to have a 17-year-old daughter who will talk to me, who cares about what I have to say, who I have a good enough relationship for her to want to communicate with me, where I've been able to demonstrate to her that I care about listening to what she has to say, and that she hasn't written me off as some stupid old person or as someone who's out of touch or who's someone who doesn't get her or doesn't understand her or whatever. It might seem like a small thing, but most people have even told me my whole life, because I have 3 daughters, they're like, well, just wait till they're teenagers. And so it's a huge success of mine, I think, that I have children who I still have a good relationship with, who voluntarily communicate with me, interact with me, and connect with me, that I've been able to invest in their lives in such a way that we've been able to maintain that relationship through the time when most people would tell you you're the least likely to have that happen. And so there's a lot of ways to answer that. I don't know that that's the thing in the whole world that I'm the most proud of, but it's something that I'm pretty happy about and feel that was kind of a milestone to be able to look at that particular time and how long we interacted and to see how crucial that was. That was really a big moment for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah. I mean, that family connection, I think that's what a lot of people say when I ask that question. It's not really a business thing. It's some kind of personal thing or family, kids.
Absolutely.
What do you see your legacy as being and the impact you want to make with your time here on this planet?
Yeah. So I'm going to say that quote again because it's the quote I say at the end of my speeches, and then I'll give an example. So E. Cummings said, "We do not believe in ourselves until someone reveals that deep inside of us something is valuable, worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch." And so what I tell people is my mission, the legacy I'm trying to leave is I'm trying to show people that deep inside of them something is valuable, but very specifically those things that they've been told is the most worthless thing about them. You can't sit still. You can't be quiet. You're too much of a perfectionist. You're too big picture. You're not detail oriented, whatever those things are. I want them to see that not only is that not true, but those are the best things about them. And that's the legacy I want to leave is hundreds and maybe even thousands of people whose lives are transformed by the realization that the thing they've been fighting against, the thing that they've been beating themselves up, maybe literally and figuratively for over the years, is actually the best thing about them, and seeing how that can be unleashed. So a small way that I already know that's happened is a woman took my kids' book home. Like I said, I wrote the kids' book because people were like, yeah, okay, but what about, I got a kid with ADHD, I got a kid with dyslexia. So I wrote my story in kind of a picture book form. And she took the book home to her son. His name was Leo. He was 10 years old and he had ADHD. And she brought a note from him the next day, just a ripped piece of paper. And it said, "Thank you, Mr. Rendall, for the book. It made me feel better about who I am."
Oh, that's wonderful.
And what I tell people is that I was the first person who showed him at age 10 that deep inside of him something was valuable. The very thing that people had spent their whole life telling him was the most worthless thing about him is ADHD. That his ADHD didn't make him worthless, that it was worth listening to, it was worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch. There's a book that I just listened to recently on audio by Peter Shankman called Faster Than Normal. And it's a whole book about how his ADD makes him better than you, not worse than you. And he's got a whole Faster Than Normal podcast. But this kid didn't know that. This kid hasn't been exposed to that. All this kid knows is they're trying to give him medicine. He's constantly in meetings. The teachers don't like him. It hurts his mom's feelings even though she loves him, and she's trying to help him succeed. She's caught between trying to help him be himself and trying to help him succeed in school. And I was able to step into that spot and tell him something that no one else was telling him. A woman came to one of my talks and her daughter had dyslexia, and she told me at the end, she said, "Now we have hope." Because one of the things I share in my talk is the number of billionaires and millionaires and entrepreneurs who have dyslexia, and how dyslexia seems to actually help people succeed, not keep them from succeeding. Unfortunately, it causes them to fail in school, which causes us to predict that they won't succeed in life. One guy went home to his 16-year-old, took him out to lunch and said, "I'm sorry." Right? And he sent me an email about the powerful conversation they had when he said, "I've been trying to change you for years. I've been trying to turn you into someone else. I've seen all your strengths as weaknesses. I've been trying to define your success as the way I believe success should be. I haven't been trying to help you become who you are. I've been trying to turn you into someone else, and I'm sorry." So I know there's more of those stories that I haven't heard because I'm a 1-hour keynote speaker most of the time, and I don't have long-term interactions with these people. And so that's really the legacy that I want to leave. I want to have done that with my wife. I want to have done that with my kids. I want to have done that with my friends. But more so, I want to have done that then on a broader scale with people. I've literally been able to speak all over the world. I'm leaving in 2 days to go to New Zealand. And so I want to know that I already do know, because it's happened, that I've changed the world in a way that caused people to see things differently, treat their employees differently. I speak to a lot of teachers and school administrators that instead of people having the same experience you and I have had, that they have a different experience where a teacher sees their strength hiding inside of that weakness. So that's absolutely the legacy I'm trying to leave, is help people see that the things they thought were the most worthless things about them are actually the most valuable things about them.
I love that. And you're clearly passionate about that. It clearly touches a personal nerve for you.
All worked up and waving my arms here.
Yeah, you're just
office, my office at home. Yeah, no one's listening right now. I'm going crazy, but that's how you know if you're passionate. Does it give you energy, right? Does it, if you're doing things that drain you, that's not a long-term strategy for success. But people think, well, I'll learn to like it and I'll figure it out. No, you won't.
Yep.
What are those things that fire you up, and do more of that? Yeah.
Beautiful. Yep. Perfect. Well, David, thanks so much for coming by and sharing the concepts you shared. I think this is an important reframe for a lot of people, and you kind of walk people through the 7 steps for your program. Definitely pick up the book, The Freak Factor. There's also, I think, 3 other books. There's a Freak Factor for kids. There's the Pink Goldfish. Is that what you said?
Yep.
And I think you had a book on leadership as well. We'll link up your sites and stuff below this video. But thanks for coming on and sharing some insights. Any parting words, and then we'll wrap this up.
Just that's my challenge that I leave with everybody is consider the possibility that your weaknesses are strengths, that your kids' weaknesses are strengths, that your spouse or partner's weaknesses are strengths. And next time you see that weakness, ask yourself, well, I wonder what the upside of that might be. And also ask yourself, is that just a bad thing, or is that just something I don't like? One of the things I teach people that as managers and parents, we need to get better at is saying, I don't like it, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. And a lot of times all we're doing is expressing our personal preferences. When I get on the plane, I'd like people to behave in a certain way. But when they're not, that doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that's not my preference. I wish they'd go slower or they'd go faster. I wish that they'd be more courteous, or I wish they'd be more efficient. But they have a reason for doing what they're doing, and it's effective in the way that they're trying to be effective. And I think too often we push our preferences as good and bad, as right and wrong, as appropriate and inappropriate, and we miss the opportunity to benefit from the diversity that other people bring.
Absolutely. Well said, and thank you again for your time. Hope everybody enjoyed this conversation with David Rendall, and we'll link up all of his information below this video. And we'll catch you all on the next one. Thanks so much for coming, David, and hope you all enjoyed it. We'll talk soon.